Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the show tonight, corporate India speaks up in one voice saying that the Agnipath scheme will bring excellent trained youngsters into the job market. But what has corporate India, or for that matter the government, done for ex-servicemen jobs so far? What about all the quotas that exist in government jobs? Once soldiers retire, do they even get to those positions? And what about the corporate world? Have they actually recruited in a large number? Well, they've all come out today in support of the government and the Agnipath scheme. But is this going to necessarily result in a better quality of entrance into corporate India? That's what we are looking at today. We've got some very special guests with us. Sanjeev Bhikchandani is the founder of Naukri.com. We're also joined by Commander KP Sanjeev Kumar. He's a naval aviator, an experimental test pilot, but also somebody who's looked very closely at the entire issue of hiring ex-servicemen. But let me go straight across to Sanjeev Bhikchandani. Thanks, Mr. Bhikchandani, very much for joining us. Why are you so optimistic of these Agniveers being acceptable and doing a good job in the corporate sector?
So look, I have dealt personally with the problem and prospects of resettling ex-servicemen, retiring servicemen, or retired servicemen in the private sector. And, I've been on and off talking to, the defense establishment about it every now and then. And we've tried to do some stuff, and it hasn't really worked. And the problem really is that if somebody has done 20 or 25 years, in the army, he gets kind of typecast. You're in your mid-40s, late 40s, you're trying to make a change. People will typecast you and say, okay, this is okay for security, okay for administration, okay for facilities management, and that's about it, right? Because you've done something for 20 years, right? And now, if you have a technical skill, say you're a signals guy, right? Or a technologist, you will get picked up immediately, right? But other than that, if you will get into a general managerial kind of role, which will sort of limit you to these verticals. However, if you take somebody who's worked just 4 years, and he started off at 17 or 18, that means he's at 22 or 21. He's more or less like a fresh college graduate that age, but with 4 years experience. And suddenly you find that, hey, here is somebody who's used to a workplace, who's used to discipline, who's focused, who's committed, who has done stuff, right? And if he is competing against a regular college graduate of the same age for a job, he'll have a very good chance. And therefore, I think he will be absorbed pretty easily.
A couple of questions over here. A 21-year-old, a 17.5 to 21 years of age, at the age of 21, when a man or a woman comes out of the scheme without a college degree, how are they necessarily better than somebody who's educated with a degree, number one? Number two, how do we assume that those who come into the corporate sector from the traditional route are less motivated or are less disciplined?
Well, I've had about 35 years of experience in the industry, Vishnu, and it's what I see about youngsters today. It's about how people snack on jobs, how they move on. It's about how committed or how difficult it is to get a really committed person, right? And let's face it, Vishnu, not all colleges are equal. You've got some pretty ordinary colleges all over the country. And as compared to those colleges, these guys will be streets ahead. Let me assure you of that.
No, but on what basis again? And what Mr. Bhikchandani has corporate India done so far in terms of hiring ex-servicemen?
Like I said, if you take somebody who's already worked between 20 years in the army, he will be typecast and stereotyped into certain kinds of verticals.
But that person would come in with incredible experience, sir.
But that may not be experience that you're looking for.
But how do you assume that a 21-year-old has that level of experience? A 21-year-old without a college degree versus somebody who's 35 years old, who's been trained for a decade plus, who maintains, for example, logistics in the armed forces.
What has he been trained in? And is that relevant? Please understand that in the corporate sector, in the new age companies, if you're over 40, it's kind of hard to find a job. Whether or not you're from the army. Because people want to hire younger people. The corporate workforce is getting more and more useful.
Okay, let me just go across to Commander KP Sanjeev Kumar, thanks very much for being with us. Now, when you, one of the things which you did do is you were looking to hire ex-servicemen or certainly officers into corporate India, into companies. How successful were you in that?
We ran a placement campaign for retiring officers who have, after undergoing a 5-month course in IIM Ahmedabad. But that is for officers which comprise the regular full service commission as well as short service commission, right? I didn't see this kind of enthusiasm really at that stage for the
in corporate India.
In corporate India, I mean,
right.
We had to work very hard, which rightfully so. We had to work very hard to find the placements. I didn't see this kind of enthusiasm at that time. But yes, I must highlight that the people who had age on their side, which Mr. Chandani rightfully mentioned, especially the short service commission officers, they invariably got picked up faster than the older lot. That means the younger you were, you had a higher chance of getting a job, because like he pointed out again, the workplaces have become more youthful. But
so
remember,
youth without experience translates into a better chance at a job than those who are far more experienced and who may not be 40 plus, they could still be in their 30s. And I would suggest that those who are in their early 40s can certainly be employed as well.
I agree, but here we are looking at a total paradigm shift. You know, we are the past is no longer comparable to what we are rolling out now.
Correct.
Because earlier we never had this. Nobody was put out on the road after 4 years of being in the army or the navy or the air force. So we are looking at a totally new thing. So we can do crystal ball gazing. But I wish all these people who are corporate leaders who are so enthusiastic about and so optimistic about the skill sets of these Agniveers. I hope they are speaking from personal experience of having hired this age of recruits, which they haven't. So whatever we are thinking, it is all based on a hope, and I am also filled with hope.
Okay.
But it's just that he's not going to be even a graduate. Very few of them would be graduate. So what I would be asking, what kind of jobs are you trying to offer them? Will it satisfy? Will it be an upgrade for him? If it's an upgrade, he's going to be happy. If it's not going to be an upgrade, he's going to be dejected because he's seen something good and he's had to leave it because he didn't make it. And now what you offer him is as important as whether he finds anything at all.
You know, Mr. Bikhchandani, we've been speaking about the corporate sector, but even if you look at the government's own numbers and you look at the government's own quotas, the number of jobs which have been reserved for people in the corporate, in the government sectors, and ex-servicemen have not filled it at all. For example, applicable reservation in Group C for ex-servicemen in central public sector undertakings, there's a 14.5% reservation, implemented just 1.15%, 13.35% is the vacancy. Recruitment of ex-servicemen into central public sector undertakings, Group D, applicable reservation 24.5%, implemented 0.3%, shortfall 24.2%. I could go on and on, including in Central Armed Police Forces. The point being that, you know, our soldiers have just not been looked after in the past after they retire. And that's terribly sad.
Vishnu, I can't speak for the public sector or for the government or for what's happened in the past in these areas. But I can tell you one thing. It's much easier to mold a 22-year-old with 4 years experience into the kind of worker you want, give the kind of training and inputs, than it is to take a 45-year-old and make him or her do the same thing to that person.
Sure.
It's as simple as that. Let me tell you one more thing also. You see, a soldier does not fight for his country. We believe he fights for his country. This is controversial, I'm just saying it, right? He joins the army inspired to fight for the country and serve the nation. But when he actually goes out to fight after 1 or 2 years, right, he is fighting for his 8 people whom he's going on patrol with, his friends, his buddies.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
Right.
And he is willing to risk his life and give his life to save the others because he knows very well they'll do the same for him.
Yes.
Right? Now that kind of commitment and teamwork, any corporate sector CEO will give his right arm for.
Okay.
Right? It is rare. It's a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a thing to say, I will take a bullet. if needed, right? And to get a 23-year-old who's faced that or even contemplated that and been prepared for it, it's a different level of commitment.
Okay, well,
now,
let's
at 23 years old, you will say, hey, I'll take the chance on everything else. I want this commitment. I want this teamwork. I want this dedication. Baki sab dekh lenge.
Okay. Commander, any last thoughts on this and perhaps on what I was referring to, that ex-servicemen have not been looked after in the recent past. Even now they aren't looked after when it comes to jobs, whether it's government jobs or private jobs. We are now focusing only on a certain age group and saying that they will be better than the older people. What happens to the older people, by the way, because we still have regular soldiers, a good 25% of them going forward?
I have a different view on that. I would disagree with what you just said, that the people are not looked after. It's quite the opposite, because actually I feel that we have become very welfare oriented in the armed forces, because we have been in peacetime, thankfully, for a long time. So we do take care of them because we run courses for them. We prepare them in a very systematic manner because they are the long service.
Okay.
Before they retire, they have months to prepare themselves, and in that department, the sailors outscore the officers. The officers still take it a little casually. The sailors prepare themselves.
Right.
But that paradigm no longer exists. That contract no longer exists. That situation no longer exists, because now he is going to have a small sum of money which he has to do whatever he can when he gets on the street. So we have been taking care of the resettlement. There is an entire Director General of Resettlement and a Department of Ex-Servicemen Affairs. But these people are neither going to be ex-servicemen nor are they going to come under the ambit of resettlement. We are not promising them resettlement. Corporates are promising. I hope they stand to their promise. I will be the happiest person if the Mahindras and the Birlas and the Tatas and Mr. Dick Chandani.
Well, they've all got on record. And we've got these tweets coming up, which where they've said that the Tatas, the Mahindras, Biocon has today. Sajjan Jindal has today. Some leaders in FICCI, corporate leaders in FICCI have done so as well.
I would screenshot them and preserve them, and I would celebrate them after 4 years, Vishnu, and I mean it, if this happens.
I'll do just that. Let's hope it does work out for all of the young men and women joining our forces. Thank you both very much for being with us. I'm going to move on now to another one. I'm going to broaden the scope, bring in political leaders as well to sort of take a look at whether the scheme is progressive going forward. Captain Ganesh Karnik of the BJP, Lieutenant General KJ Singh, former General Officer Commanding in Chief of the Western Command, and Aishwarya Mahadev of the Congress Party join us. General KJ Singh, if we just look at the scheme, is it not a big problem that till date there is not one figment of data on how much we are saving on this every single year? Because if we are not saving on this, and therefore not transferring these funds towards new weaponry and capital expenses, then why do this at all?
Vishnu, firstly, thank you. It's good to be on your show. I would take the discussion to the previous discussion that I was hearing.
No, sir, could you answer my question, sir? My question is quite specific. Why are we doing this if the money saved is not going towards weapons acquisitions?
No, there you are absolutely right. Last time we tried to cut 50,000 people in army, and we were made to believe that the money which will be saved will be used for buying weapons or modernization. But we were told that money it's not like a pocket money that you can transfer it from one pocket to another. It lapses into consolidated fund of India. To answer to modernization is not this kind of saving, but having a non-lapsable kind of a budget for modernization. That is the real answer, and we have to find more monies to modernize.
Aishwarya Mahadev, let me just come across to you. Are you convinced with the argument that we need younger people, more youth, more motivation, and therefore we need to change the entire structure of the armed forces as it is right now? I would suggest that those who are on an average age 32 in the armed forces don't lack discipline, they don't lack motivation. If anything, they are part of a system which works. Do you not believe that the real reason for this scheme is something else?
Good evening, Vishnu. And I think, first of all, having the youth everywhere is an advantage, but this is not one of those cases. If I may take the liberty of saying, on your panel, I'm a 29-year-old. I have a lot of friends who are in the job market even at their age. A lot of them with their specialized degrees, having gone through even corporate work, MBAs and whatnot, are still looking for productive and meaningful work. One. So when the founder of Naukri.com talks about how they have better discipline to be employed, one example, when the government sector itself does not accommodate ex-servicemen of such great caliber after so many years and recruitment is so abysmal, how can you ensure a corporate world whose bottom line and profits matter the most will ensure that they will take in people who are getting what, as according to Dharmendra Pradhan today, an IGNOU degree, as compared to what, the Yales, the Ivies and children who have substantially invested in those 4 years. You're basically bringing out an entire regiment of people, one who have been rejected because they didn't make the 25%, out into the workforce and having to scramble and also scrounge around to make ends meet, because the people who get into the armed forces are not always the elite English educated children suited for the corporate world. A majority of them come from the aspirational class of rural India, Vishnu, and that is a reality. Nobody is acknowledging that. I have the privilege of coming from a city with an English education, and I know how many of my own colleagues and my friends are suffering to find good education. And now you have these youngsters who have served for the country coming out jaded, disillusioned if nothing else. And corporate world today, somebody said screenshot it to hold them responsible. And I think that is something that has to be answered.
No, Aishwarya, I'm just trying to understand. What are you saying? Are you suggesting that it's a bit unfair for those who are highly educated and looking for jobs to be in a job market along with those who've come fresh out of the services as Agniveers, who aren't as well educated, not with a degree, and competing for the same jobs?
No, Vishnu, let me clarify. I'm saying the market is so hard enough even for the people who have gone through years and years of education.
Right.
And you have taken four years of a student away from a formal, full-fledged degree. You put him to service. You put him out in the job market. And the way the market forces in the corporate world works, I can assure you, you cannot give them meaningful employment. And the future of these youngsters is in jeopardy. And today you see a union minister saying we'll train them to be electricians. And you have a man, absolutely no insult to the dignity of labor, but a man saying I will make them my security guards in the BJP office. And you question why these youngsters who wanted to serve for the rest of their lives and are protesting now are actually have not had their fears assuaged at all. The situation is quite dire. The government has no solution. In 5 days, they've had 11 different changes in their policy. And every day they seem to try and come up with more. This is worse than the farm bills.
Half a second, Aishwarya. Captain Kandik, do you believe this scheme has really been thought through?
Vishnu, good evening and Jai Hind, and good evening to General Saab and Aishwarya too. Well, a new policy has been thought over. I left after my short service, and initially I had faced this problem. I did not go for a reserved job in a government sector, but I could find some firm foothold in the corporate world, and now I'm into politics. That's a different thing altogether. The genuine concerns expressed by Aishwarya and outside about the rehabilitation and future settlement of these Agniveers is a cause of concern. I have no doubts about it. In fact, today I heard that even people who pass 8th standard are also, being considered to be taken in, whatever it is. See, there was a general talk in this country that every young individual should be exposed to army at least for 2 years. So from that perspective, and keeping the young, army in mind, a new policy in terms of recruitment has been designed. Now, this particular design, there can be certain loopholes or apprehensions as expressed by others. I don't think we should connect it with the money available for modernization or purchase of equipment and all those things. That is one part. I mean, that's required.
If young people in India were in the armed forces serving for 17 odd years and walking out with a pension, they were employed and experienced, and with that pension they could carry on with the rest of their lives even if they did not have a job. Why if you are not saving money in this particular scheme and then transferring it to weapons purchases, which is the need of the hour, then why do this for motivated youth I mean, a 32-year-old is not unmotivated, sir.
Vishnu, you didn't allow me to complete.
Go ahead.
The general's observation that money required for modernization cannot be brought from, reorganizing the manpower or restructuring the manpower requirement of the army. They are two different things altogether. Or by, asking them to go home after, 4 years of service, that money will not be transferred to...
But don't you at least think we should know what the savings are every year?
Pardon me?
Don't you at least think we should know what the savings from the scheme are every year
and
and over a period of time?
No, we should know. I think as far as this new policy is concerned, especially after the Kargil war, people have thought, deliberated, discussed regarding making the army young. From that perspective, people are being brought in for 4 years, given basic training, make them to spend some time
but
in
Captain,
the
I
units
must
along the
disagree,
borders.
sir. The Indian
Yes.
infantryman, the Indian Jawan has not been found lacking because he's too old in his performance. He is outstanding. He remains the finest infantryman in the world. He's operating at 19,000 feet as we have this discussion right now in extreme cold
Vishnu,
weather. Why do we
Vishnu,
need to
please-
bring down that age, sir?
Vishnu, please leave it to the army chiefs to decide, army generals to decide.
There
What
are
should
any
we
number of
every
army
fighting-
generals, sir, who believe that this scheme is wrong.
Not the serving chiefs have mentioned, they have welcomed it already. And this has not happened by the government. People have involved in discussions.
General
They have
KJ Singh,
decided.
General KJ Singh.
Vishnu, one thing I would like to debunk two things. One is there is too much of packaging being put into bringing down the age. It was never a concern to bring out the age of Jawans, because there are some war fighting skills like mountain climbing, rock climbing, rope climbing. They require people who are sure-footed, and you don't become sure-footed in first year of your service. So you need to, like when we go on such kind of missions, you need people who are experienced. So this thing about to this young and all is little hyped up. I don't subscribe to it. I don't know what current generation feels. I'll say it upfront. We need people, and in any case, BPT standards from 17 to 35 are same. Fitness level required is same.
No, but then what else is the benefit? If why don't we as a nation say that we need to bring down our pension bills because we can't afford it?
Yeah, we should say.
So why don't we say that directly?
About it.
Why don't we say that perhaps OROP was such an expense on the exchequer that we need to find ways of managing our economy? Is that what this is all about? Because younger age profile, when the system ain't broke, being the reason to do this, it seems a bit strange. This question has to be asked. Why are we trying to fix a system which isn't broken?
See,
where is the performance of the Indian Jawan lacking?
Vishnu, there are, in my perception, two drivers to this scheme. One is right sizing, which implies downsizing.
Sure.
And second is reducing pension bills.
Yeah.
These are the two drivers in this scheme. Yeah. And what is going to happen finally in a steady state is that you are going to have a larger throughput of recruitment. So
this isn't to suggest that the army has to be, or the armed forces have to be colossally large. If they have to be right size, they have to be right size. If the pension bill has to come down, it has to come down. But I think the question does stand. If you are cutting down the size of the armed forces, are the funds that you save not meant to go to the armed forces themselves? And where better to serve the armed forces than to make them more capable? And to make them more capable, you need defense purchases. There are any number of schemes which have been stalled for a decade plus for weapon systems. We face very strong adversaries, certainly in the north and in our west. Why are we doing this without actually trying to arm our forces more with the money we save?
Yeah, there has to be accountability. You are right that if we are saving money, we should put it out in public domain and we should employ it correctly. In any case, regardless of saving, we need to modernize our armed forces. We have two adversaries and we have to find money for that. That is the element. We've been saying it for so long now.
Okay. Aishwarya, again, same question. Are you convinced about the reasons which have been stated for introducing this scheme?
Absolutely not. And Vishnu, and very pertinent that was mentioned is that fiscal prudence cannot come at the cost of our national security, especially because the geopolitical position we're in and the sort of hostile territories around, to basically say, whether the burden comes down on the exchequer, we save on pensions, is not enough justification for making youngsters from 17 to 21 cannon fodder. I may be young, but I can tell you the value of experience. I can tell you the value that for an armed force or in the armed forces, you need 8 years at least to strategically be well placed within the system, to be crucial and critical. To have these in and out sort of contractual postings is not only something demoralizing for all these youngsters per se for the past 2 years who spent their life on it, but also not something that is productive, because what comes after? Right? Even for well-served army men, you see how difficult it is. And then you're seeing the same problem with youngsters as well. And the sort of changes that keep coming in almost like a trial and error is doing nothing. It's only fueling far more fires. And this is not necessary, Vishnu. Let's be honest. You are one of the best defense experts as a journalist I have seen for years now, from Rafale or even before, right? We understand modernization is a problem. We understand OROP had a lot of tension. We understand that strategic recruitment, because there's massive recruitment issues at different ranks that have to be put in. Those should have been prioritized, as opposed to bringing in 46,000 youngsters who you cannot substantially or even trust to be the most efficient in such a short period of time, and then go out and give them no hope after. I think it's an extremely shoddy plan, much like GST, much like farm bills, and you'll see far more revisions, far more press conferences.
Well, let's see finally what happens. And it is welcome. It has to be said that corporate India is now saying that they'll hire them. There are schemes which have been announced as well. But again, one small point: if a lot of these soldiers have a 10% quota in the Central Armed Police Forces, an additional quota which has been formed for Agniveers, then those who don't want to be Agniveers but just want to be policemen and policewomen will find it that much more difficult to get a job. So there would be potential unemployment at another level. We'll leave it over there. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. Comments coming in on coup. A parent says, parent is how they designate themselves. Nothing is etched in stone. The corporates will backtrack if the company does poorly. Manohar Mahato says, why are corporate assurances required? Why can't the government back up the complete plan? Well, the government has backed up the plan to a certain extent, introducing the possibility of jobs in several areas. Let's see what finally takes place. We're out of time on this program. From all of us here,